when I was about 6 years old, Trungpa Rinpoche came back to Sikkim and visited His Holiness the Karmapa, and I was there along with many other Tulkus, and I met him then. That was in 1961 or something like that.
And so tell us about it. What do you remember? What do you remember of it?
What I remember is that he, in those days, it was actually very unusual for a Tibetan Tulku to appear in Western outfit. He was wearing a suit, and he came to spend some time at the monastery. And from what I remember, he did not change his attire, and he did not even put on a Tibetan gown, which might have been more acceptable, I suppose, for the Tibetans at the time. This is in '61, as I mentioned. So that was quite radical, and so that sort of stuck in my mind.
And here you are, sir, a Tulku yourself, wearing a Western jacket.
Yes, I suppose, Trungpa Rinpoche really was sort of a pioneer in the idea that if you're going to bring Buddhism to the West, then you have to really adapt to Western way of life and to Western way of thinking to a degree. And whatever contribution that Buddhism can make has to be in that context, not outside of it, not saying, here's the Buddhist worldview, and then there's the Western worldview, and for Westerners to accept Buddhism, you then have to leave your worldview behind in order to embrace the Buddhist view. But he made it possible for people to actually think in a very realistic fashion how you can incorporate the Buddhist the Buddhist view in the Western frame of reference or Western context. So so I myself also, try to sort of think like that, and wearing Western outfit and things like that is easier for me. I don't mind sort of leading a normal life in the West. I don't have to sort of appear to be different or stick out or something like that in order to make a statement in terms of who I am and what I am. So he made that possible, I think.
Well, that's great, because one of the questions for sure was why it was so important to him, not just to speak English so that he could connect with people, but to translate the Dharma into English, so that he was actually teaching Dharma in English.
Yes. I think it's because in order to transmit any kind of idea, we have to use language as the medium. So obviously language is a critical point there. And I think Trungpa Rinpoche really felt that you do not need to learn an Asian language in order to understand Buddhism, because he felt very strongly, and I think he was right, in thinking that you can use English to express Buddhism fully. There's nothing lacking in English as a language in order for you to be able to understand Buddhist teachings. Because some people have some questions about how adequate the English translations are, for instance. But I think language is an evolving phenomena in itself, and English is very versatile, as you know. So if things can be translated from Latin into English, then I don't think there's any problem being able to sort of communicate Tibetan philosophical ideas in English language.
Great. And now we're talking about a decision that is, I think, there's even more to it, more profound than just, adjusting somewhat to Western society so that you can have a connection and people can feel all right connecting to you, and they're also not like trivializing or the opposite, which is romanticizing you because you have a robe on and that makes you cool and all that. But when he took the robes off, it was like a big thing to him.
Very true. I think what you have to understand with Trungpa Rinpoche in terms of disrobing at that time in England is that he was not alone. He was there with two other Tibetan lamas, and both of them are Tibetan tulkus, reincarnate lamas. And what was different about Trungpa Rinpoche is not that he disrobed, because the other two also disrobed. What was different about him was that he took one extra step forward, which is related to what we were talking about before in terms of his visit to Sikkim in 1961 or thereabouts in a Western suit. Because he wanted to live that life. He wanted to sort of make extra effort to make sure that Buddhism is not seen as something exotic and alien and Tibetan or Asian or whatever, but say to them, a Buddhist does not have to look any different to you or anybody. And you can be Buddhist. Even a Buddhist Lama can look like an ordinary person leading a normal life in the West. And not many Lamas were ready to do that at the time. And I think some of the flack that he received from the Tibetan establishment had more to do with that aspect than the fact that he disrobed, because many Tibetan lamas marry and they can live their monastic life and there's no problem. I mean, but in those days, even I remember things being discussed in relation to how much should the lamas take on the Western worldview and Western way of life. How much Westernization is safe, which included your lifestyle and what you wore, what you ate, who you married, and the fact that he married an English woman at the time, of course, didn't help. I'm sure the Tibetans would have much preferred if he had married a nice girl from a nice Tibetan family instead of a nice girl from a good English family kind of thing. So, so there's that aspect. Yeah.
Again, one of the things I've learned over the last 40 years or whatever with him, but especially making the film, is that and I've been to Tibet twice now.
Yes.
And when I went the first time, it just stunned me. It stunned me. We went to Sermang, and we drove in a car, and we were just there. We didn't like fly in or anything. We just drove. And it was so stunning. And then when I went back almost 8 or 9 years later, it was the same thing. And when I'm in Tibet, it strikes me, he is very Tibetan, you know, in his way of his humor, his
That's also true.
ironclad, you know, who he is every minute.
Yes.
He's like very Tibetan, you know, and he never lost anything by opening up something like dressing or speaking English, or there was an iota of Tibetanness.
I think that's a very, very good point. I think you've really put it in a nutshell regarding Trungpa Rinpoche, what he personified. He was so Western, so contemporary, and everything like that, very approachable from Western point of view, while remaining totally Tibetan. And I think he really believed even the Tibetan world view, if there's such, which is based on the Dharma anyway, had a lot to give to the West. And he was quite relentless in that regard. And some of the times when people had problems with him, it was about that, you know, he was trying to sort of get the Tibetan Dharma across, and then sometimes people may have had some difficulty in comprehending what it was that he was trying to get across, because he didn't appear like a Tibetan, you know, and then at the same time he was sort of so Tibetan in some other ways, and then people had to sort of juggle things a bit, and it was a bit difficult for some people. But I think from his point of view, he did not see any kind of contradiction. He felt that you can be a Westerner and be completely be comfortable, but nevertheless you have to swallow some bitter pills that the Tibetans are going to give to you. In the form of Dharma teachings, of course, not in terms of Tibetan cultural baggage or whatever, but as Dharma is being transmitted, some aspects of the Dharma you may find difficult to swallow, but you have to swallow it, you know. And he made sure that people did. I think that's. You know, that's Trungpa Rinpoche. You know?
Yeah.